Module 7, positive emphasis. In many ways, this module just reinforces and re-emphasizes the material that we learned in Module 11 about how to write a negative message. But it sort of expands positive emphasis to a general workplace environment. And we'll watch Sean Anker's positivity video in class. And that also links to this notion that if we try to just have a really positive relationship with our coworkers, with our customers, it's much more productive. It helps us to facilitate efficiency and productivity. And so positive emphasis is important not only in our messages, but also just in our general workplace persona. As the book talks about, sometimes we have to deliver negative information, and sometimes delivering that straightforwardly builds our credibility, okay? And so that can be one option. Sometimes we have to deliver negatives in order to help people to recognize the seriousness of the situation and so that they act more immediately. And so basically, as I said, sometimes in business we can't avoid the negative. However, when we have to deliver negative information, it's good if we can still keep our sights on the positive emphasis because, as I mentioned, a positive work environment is just more productive, it's more pleasant. That makes people buy in more, be motivated more, want to be a part of your team. 5 techniques to de-emphasize the negative. Again, some of these are really just reinforcement from Module 11, but we want to avoid negative words, and we'll talk some more about what kinds of words can really draw negative attention to a message. We want to focus on what the reader can do and not on their limitations. Again, Module 11 talks about psychological reactance and the ways that people can feel if their freedom is limited, they're much more inclined to try to resist or object to a message. And so we want to focus on what they can do and what freedoms they do have, such as alternatives and other options. Sometimes it's really important to give a reason for a negative or to link it to a benefit in order to really help people to understand why it has to happen or to see a silver lining or positive aspect to that negative. However, if we don't have a good reason, we want to just go ahead and skip over that part. That relates to negatives as well. We want to just not focus on negativity if we don't have to. If it's truly trivial or unimportant, we can omit the negative. We also want to just, again, to help de-emphasize the negative and focus people's attention on the positive aspects and the good relationships we have with them. We can sandwich the negative in the middle in order to achieve that purpose. So some negative words that you want to try to avoid in your language and in your writing. Words that begin with things like dis are often negative and miss are often negative. So you can see here we have disapprove, dissatisfied. Those are very negative and even sometimes kind of aggressive or angry words. And so you want to avoid those kinds of things. Mistake, misfortune really draws attention to negative happenings. Inwords and unwords are also really strong negatives that will draw people's attention and help them focus on the negative, which is the opposite of what we want. So words like inadequate, incomplete, inconvenient, or unclear, unfair, unprepared, unfortunate, unsure. I have a repetition here. So just ignore those ones. Those are kinds of words that draw people's attention to negatives rather than focusing on the positive. Other kinds of words that can be problematic, and the book lists several, actually. They have an entire chart on page 108 that you can refer to. But words like error, problem, eliminate, hesitate, objection, reject, sorry, worry, fault, ignore, impossible. These kinds of things, instead of focusing on the positive, again, draw people's attention to the negative, which is not what we want to do. We want to help them move away, move beyond the negative to the next step, to the positivity, and focus on our positive relationships. Now, language can also create hidden negatives, which is something you want to be really aware of. This can accidentally happen in a message, and then it creates a negative situation when people didn't intend that. So that means that basically the words are negative in context or in the situation, even though they might otherwise not be a problem. So words like but and however clearly note a shift to the opposite. So if you're talking about something positive and then you use that transition word, People know something bad is coming. Similarly, I hope and I trust can sound weak or unsure. Now, I hope seems like a positive, but given a specific situation, like I hope the construction project gets back on track, that can sound really weak or unsure, and it can actually increase people's uncertainty and negativity about the situation. However, as we've talked about, and Module 15 talks about, we want to just try with our language to be accurate and appropriate. And so as best we can, we want to stick to the specifics and don't interpret or elaborate too much, because that's what leads us into these kinds of negative language and use and negative vocabulary terms, is when we begin to try to elaborate, use modifiers, go into more detail. Just be specific, accurate, appropriate, and, less is more often with negative messages. Focus on what the reader can do. This is all about you attitude and writing from the reader's perspective. We want to avoid elaborating on the limitations of the situation. Okay, so instead of continuing to talk about the negative, and we'll analyze some letters in class that do this, that really focus on all the details of the problem and all of the constrictions on the reader, that's just going to increase. The more text space that you give to it, the more attention your readers will give to the negativity. So try to increase the text space that's talking about positive aspects rather than negative ones. Again, we can try to help readers move beyond the negative by justifying the negative with reasons or linking it to a benefit. And those benefits can actually be very interesting. Sometimes if you're creative, you can see a bright side that others haven't thought of that might really be a silver lining to the situation, that might really help people just kind of be okay with it and move on. However, you don't want to be condescending or insincere about that benefit. If you can't deliver on it, if it's not real, if it's really kind of flimsy, don't do it. Again, one opportunity to just eliminate the amount of text focusing on the negative altogether is to omit it if it's truly unimportant or trivial. However, our book specifically talks in the yellow section about considering the ethical uses of this and considering the legal implications. If someone really needs the information in order to make a decision, it's really unethical and may even be illegal to withhold negative information from them. And so you don't want to omit it unless it just isn't an issue and they don't need to worry about it. One other way to omit the negative is just to avoid repeating it. Our book specifically talks in Module 11 about giving that negative right and giving it once and clearly. So if you have to give a refusal or you have to deliver negative information, don't keep saying, I'm really sorry about this, and, just say it one time, don't go back to it, don't repeat it. We talked in Module 11 about sandwiching the negative. That really helps us to place the negative where reader attention is lowest, and so that where reader attention is high, at the tops and bottoms of our message, is where our positive is really emphasized, and that will help focus their attention on the positive. Now, Module 7 actually goes into detail about being careful too about those paragraphs that wrap across pages, because our attention is typically focused at the ends of paragraphs and ends of text. And so just when we're scanning a document, often we won't really see the information in the middle, but we will actually pick up on the sentences at the bottoms and tops of paragraphs and pages. And so we want to avoid putting our negative in those places. It should not only be sandwiched within the message, it should be sandwiched within the paragraph. We also talked in the Module 11 video about watching tone and attitude, and Module 7 really elaborates on this. This is where it really goes into detail, and I encourage you to really pay attention to this. You want to be polite and deferential, if not altogether formal, when delivering negative information. It's often a critical time. People really want to see that integrity. You really want to build your credibility, so you want to be very aware of your level of politeness and your attitude toward the negative message. Avoid giving orders or imperatives. The book gives several examples like, let me know by tomorrow, or, soften those. You want to try to use polite requests rather than demands. However, you want to forego some politeness if it makes the message unclear. So we talked about those kinds of language use that, like I hope or I trust, that sound uncertain or less confident. Even if those soften the message, that makes the outcome seem uncertain. So don't go there if it sort of reduces your clarity. In a low stakes situation, it's often more advisable to be more straightforward. It's easier to be direct in those situations. However, if you have a high stakes negative situation, be a little more careful about your language, your level of politeness. More hedging is often appropriate in high stakes negatives, right? And so you don't want to put anything in writing that could get you legally in trouble, that you could be held to later as an example of poor management. You just want to be really aware, be specific, be direct. Don't repeat the negative. Limit the amount of space in your text that you're referring to the negativity. Now, apologies. One of the ways people often try to soften negative messages is to apologize. It seems like the polite thing to do. I generally say, don't do it. Don't apologize. And the book reinforces this, particularly in situations where the error is small and you've already corrected it. There's no need to apologize. You've solved the problem. If you're not at fault, it's not anything you did. It's something the customer participated in. There's no real fault there. There's no need to apologize. And what's more, if you do apologize in situations where you or your organization really are not at fault, it may later have legal or personal implications for your organization or your role at your job. So if you get yourself into a situation where you've admitted fault, now the organization is liable, there could be all kinds of legal implications, issues, lawsuits, things like that. So avoid apologies is my rule of thumb. If you really are at fault, there really is a reason to apologize. Do it early, do it briefly, do it sincerely, and do it once. If I see in your negative messages the word sorry more than one time, no. Again, it's like negative messaging. Don't repeat the negative. Don't repeat the apology. Say it one time, do it in the beginning, and move on. And so I think too, apologies about readers' feelings, like I'm sorry that you felt this way, while maybe good in interpersonal relationships like in face-to-face situations, in writing, it just sounds condescending. So I would avoid that as well. Okay, that's Module 7. And again, these are all things to keep in mind at all times, but particularly important when we have negative information to deliver.